Hello, citizens of Gotham. My name is Graham Elwood, and you are watching The Political Vigilante. There is only one show that is going on for 7 years and only has 72,000 subscribers. that has been going this long. I should have 500,000 subscribers. Easy. I cannot even break 80,000. So, and one of the reasons is my nonstop coverage of Epstein. I'm convinced of it. Although we get some big views from it, it is insane. So the Epstein information has been rolling out this last week. It is January, what are we at, 9th? More information has come out that we're going to go through in a second. And to talk about this from Status Coup, one of the real true indie journalists who goes on the street. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the fine streets of Gotham City, Jordan Chariton.
Hey there.
How's it going, man?
Good. Just put my baby down and now ready to talk about all things sinister in Gotham.
Thank you for taking the time out. I know it's a little late there for you, and you got a kid and all that. So one of the things, you and I have been talking, I've been on your show a couple times in the last week or so to discuss this on Status Coup. You've covered it a little bit. I obviously have covered this quite a lot, but the newer revelations that have come out. I follow Julie K. Brown, which if anyone out there watching does not follow her, please do. She's the Miami Herald reporter that really broke all of this in 2019. And she's very much staying on top of these new documents that have slowly been being released. And I think they're just going to slow drop these for the next whatever months, man. Meanwhile, no one will get arrested at all. But this is what I'm sorry, this is the WikiLeaks one. This is not, we'll talk about that in a second. But I wanted to talk about these. Sorry, I queued up the wrong ones. We will talk about that in a little bit, but I wanted to, new unsealed documents have come out and are unsealed and unredacted, I guess, the documents. So these are the ones, and this is, first of all, I want to go, this is from Julie K. Brown right here. I just want to read this one. So this is from earlier today. Breaking Virginia Jew Free names including Les Wexner, George Mitchell, and other redacted politicians in newly released deposition. And she throws up after being forced in detail to detail the acts. More to come. This is 5 hours ago. And then we saw the response to that from this woman, Paige S., who I don't know, but she's been covering this since 2008 or 2009. Alas, within Maxwell's objection to produce documents in the section where she lied about not being available to be disposed for family emergency, was actually photographed at Chelsea Clinton's wedding. And then this other woman, Marie, goes through these documents where you see this right here. It's pretty horrific what is said in that. So I wanted to talk to you, Jordan, because we've discussed it on your show, and these new revelations as they're coming out. There's also an alleged that there is a sex tape, but it's alleged, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, that there's a sex tape with a child and Bill Clinton and Prince Andrew and Richard Branson, but that hasn't been confirmed.
Yeah, I was thinking of reporting on that yesterday, but it was too muddy in my opinion because the victim retracted it. She walked it back to the New Yorker a couple years ago, but then again, you kind of have to play mental gymnastics thinking, well, why did she retract it? Was she being threatened? Did she feel that she could be in danger going forward with it? So factually, she did retract it. That's why I didn't report on it. But, she also, in reading her emails, alluded to threats she was getting. So it's kind of, on the merits, she retracted it, but you don't know why.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people that have I mean, look, Epstein and Jean-Luc Brunel both committed suicide in prison. So if those guys are committing suicide in prison, which I don't see them as like, oh, they were so despondent, they couldn't live with themselves. I don't see that happening at all. You got to understand that a victim is probably like, well, if these guys are getting taken out, I'm terrified. And they were flat out threatened. I mean, they were flat out threatened. And if they were brought to the island or the penthouse or in Manhattan or whatever, then God only knows what they witnessed and saw. How many people did they see just kind of, I mean, that's one of the interviews that this is substantiated in an interview that Maria Farmer did, where she said she was trafficked at a young age in the 90s, and she saw just some girls would just disappear. And she was like, I don't know where they went. So factually, she did walk it back, but you have to ask yourself, that's a valid question to ask yourself. I don't think it's tinfoil hatty to ask yourself that question at all. But these new revelations
I've had in a different context, people come on the record, whistleblowers on Flint, covering the water crisis and other things, that then walk it back after being threatened. So it's not like a unusual thing. That wasn't about, sexual abuse or anything like that, but it's not an unusual thing for people with families to, get a sudden burst of, fuck it. I want to I want to speak out. And then afterwards, something happens and they walk it back and say, don't use my name.
And that's a Flint water crisis, which, while a serious, significant thing, pales in comparison to presidents and world leaders raping children. This is the kind of thing where, the Flint water crisis, someone could maybe lose their job. Maybe it may be prosecuted, but the Epstein stuff is like, if this was prosecuted correctly, these are crimes that would be, I mean, R. Kelly's in jail for 30 years. I mean, this is what we're talking about. So
yeah.
It very much stands to reason. So in seeing these new revelations or these new documents or these new by Julie K. Brown, but depositions with unredacted names now by Virginia Roberts Giuffre, who Virginia Roberts Giuffre is probably the most vocal, and I would argue maybe one of the more reputable. Not that the other survivors aren't reputable, but Virginia has been so, strong with her legal team and forcing this issue and not backing down and going to civil trials, going to whatever she wants, whatever angles she can do to get the truth out and to get some sort of, acknowledgement to the victims. What do you see this? I mean, this is sort of an ever transforming thing. And you and I have theorized on your show, but as this new information comes out, where do you see this?
Well, I mean, first off, I would say on the timing of the releases, it is interesting that they keep releasing these documents since last week, midday, late afternoon. I mean, if you work in the media industry, you know that the best time to get stuff out is early morning on the East Coast. That's generally when the news cycle starts. If I'm pitching a story to bigger outlets, I'll be emailing them at like 8:30, 9 a.m. when editors and, reporters are generally getting into the office. By noon, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, the news site, what happened at 9 a.m. Nobody even remembers because everything's moving 100 miles a minute. So I do find that interesting. Like, why is the court waiting to post this stuff like late afternoon? I mean, I have my theories. I'm sure you do, but it does. You can post it early morning. You've already done the redactions or what have you. So that's number one. I find it odd that or suspicious that they're posting it later in the day. Secondly, I think that, obviously Bill Clinton and Donald Trump are going to get the biggest attention if they're mentioned. Mm-hmm. But we should point out it's a pretty big deal when you see names like George Mitchell, who is a massive, if you know politics, I mean, he was a massive figure in the Democratic Party for decades, served for Bill Clinton, served for Obama as ambassadors and other positions. Bill Richardson, who's died, but was a big figure in the Democratic Party. I mean, he ran for president. He was New Mexico governor, another ambassador, I think, to Clinton. These are like these are not backbenchers in the Democratic Party. They're big name people who helped with fundraising and were kind of in the Pelosi category in the Democratic Party. So you don't want to do guilt by association, but you have to figure if this guy's having sex with minors or is in that world, that people within the party, maybe they didn't know every little detail, but might have known something untoward was going on with this guy, both of them. So that you kind of question who, you're on the subway. They say, if you see something, say something. It seems like that did not apply here. And then, of course, Bill Clinton, in the latest batch that came out today, you saw depositions with Virginia Giuffre. I mean, she's publicly stated before this that he was on the island, but you're actually seeing the interviews. And it's kind of a big deal that you could read. I mean, she's saying he was across from me at the table. There was two young women next to him. The media is not really talking about that, or certainly not investigating it. But I'm no Trump fan. But with the classified documents case with Trump, for example, they had a TikTok timeline for everything on his lies, rightfully so. But you and I have talked. I mean, you got Virginia Giuffre saying he was at multiple dinners on the island. You have a maintenance worker on the island who Epstein had tasked with creating his own secret comms system, so the phone lines would be private and not be able to be surveilled. He said he saw them. I think it's a pretty big deal that, if it was Trump who said he was never on the island, and a deposition comes out with a woman saying, he multiple dinners. I mean, it would be running nonstop on MSNBC and CNN, rightfully so. But because it's Bill Clinton, I haven't seen anything. So I think that in other stories I've covered, the media is as large a part as the cover up as the actual figures. And in this case, I'm sure if there's ever any justice, we'll find out that the media knew about whether it's Bill Clinton. And there's two options with Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, and some of the others. They either were directly involved with underage women, which is, of course, a crime and horrid, or they weren't directly involved, but they knew about it and looked the other way, which is also a crime.
Yeah. I mean, and also not to mention, again, with regard to Clinton, it's not only is it eyewitness testimony, it's flight logs. I mean, he flew to the island. I mean, Trump has only flown on he flew on his plane 5 times, but he did not fly to the island. My knowledge is there's no flight logs of Trump flying to the island. Now, I don't believe that makes him innocent, because God only knows what could happen on those planes anywhere. We know Epstein, when he was, in custody in Florida in 2009, he was literally flying his jet around during the day and with trafficked girls. I mean, so Trump could do that. But again, like you say, this should be the leading story. This should be a hard-pressed story. And again, some people in the Trump camp were like, oh, Trump, he's this hero that was going to arrest all of them. It's like, no, at the very least, Trump knew and did nothing and kept hanging out with this guy at the very least. And as you and I have discussed on your show, and I've brought it up on this show, but it bears repeating, is again, there's 5 flights that Trump was on. There's all the photos from all the parties. There's the quote that Trump said, he and I like the same type of women, or whatever that quote is. There's Acosta, who gave Epstein the sweetheart deal in Florida, who was put in Trump's cabinet. There's women that were trafficked out of Mar-a-Lago. There's I wish Maxwell, I wish her well when she got arrested and he was still in office. So there's enough hard evidence for the Department of Justice and the FBI to open up a thorough and just an investigation. And as you said, though, the media should be screaming about this. But we know the media has been called off. We know the media is in cahoots just from the Amy Rohrbach interview from the leaked audio or the leaked video from, what was it, 2019, which is like, oh, I had this story 3 years ago. So she had this story in 2016 and they pulled it because they got pressure from Buckingham Palace, and ABC's owned by Disney.
Well, I mean, it's also just one big club and you're not in it. Like ABC, for example, George Stephanopoulos is their biggest star, and he worked for Bill Clinton. Bill, NBC, MSNBC, Comcast owns it. Who held the first fundraiser for Joe Biden? A Comcast vice president, David Cohen, I believe his name was. Union busting company, by the way. But they're all in the same, little cesspool as the Clintons, because it's Clinton world, Obama world, and Biden world. So Comcast has relationships with the Democratic Party, Republican Party too. So also, I mean, I don't think it should be dismissed. We know Bill Clinton likes younger women because when he was in the White House, he was in his 50s, and had a relationship with Monica Lewinsky, who was in her early 20s. Legal, gross, but legal, but early 20s, 16, 17. That's not that far off.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just all of these outlets. The Daily Beast had a direct relationship for a while. Chelsea Clinton was on the board of their parent company. So it just seems to me that a lot of these outlets, whether it's through their parent companies or their lawyers, I mean, I've had stories green-lighted by outlets on Flint and other things and then killed like a week or two before because the lawyers, have a thing, are too scared or what have you. But it does seem to me, forget alleged sexual abuse, but the flight logs you mentioned, that's an inconsistency. Multiple witnesses, he was on the island. You would think, forget investigating, there'd be some headlines about that.
Yeah.
There aren't. Honestly, I don't even see it covered that much in independent media, even in terms of these countries, not just Clinton. I mean, Trump, I think there's less smoke with Trump as far as was he part of this trafficking ring. But does anyone think Donald Trump would shed an eye or call the police if he knew Epstein or any of these people were with underage girls? So there's, he's a former president. If he knew, that should be investigated. But it's really troubling. I mean, it's really troubling that we know that the New Yorker a few years ago killed part of a story of forget her name, a British journalist. She had allegations from the Farmer sisters of sexual abuse by Epstein, and that was killed. The editor, Franklin Foer, who is legendary for being part of like societal New York City, and kind of being in these circles of Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein, not anything untoward, but just like being invited to the cocktail parties and this and that. He said that, the journalist, by the time we were ready to go to press, she added these accusations. But it then came out later through emails that she found these women to go on the record weeks before the story was supposed to go out. So how many Epstein stories have been killed? Not just at ABC, but elsewhere. And I find it very interesting that 2 days ago, when the latest batch came out on Bill Clinton being on the island, when outlets reached out to him, his people, not being on the island, about storming into Vanity Fair to kill a story on behalf of Epstein, that his people just refused to comment. It's very simple. If I didn't do it, I'm going to scream it from the rooftops, because you'd think there's witnesses that saw the former president at Vanity Fair or things like that. So if he didn't, you would think that would help his overall case by saying, you see, they're lying. His people didn't want to say anything.
Right. And there's so many things here. Like we haven't even got into all of these recruiters and women that were complicit in this crime. Like no one's being prosecuted. Like no one's being prosecuted for anything. Like, and there's so many crimes here, and they're going to just slow release us.